Well, how about that? Oh, 30 pound of late winter, early spring. Common, absolutely mega fish, really clean. Still covered in leeches as well, so it's obviously not been up long. And yeah, the result of keeping my eyes open this morning. Saw a show, early doors. Weighed it up for a few minutes because I didn't have a rod anywhere near it. And yeah, put a rod there. Half an hour later it was away. I had a smaller one, and then it's gone with this later this afternoon. So yeah, mega fish. And just typical really of spring fishing. You know, I think fishing with your eyes, letting the carp tell you where they want to be, and just getting rigs on them is by far the most important thing to do in spring. Yeah, lovely. Happy days. Let's get you back. Go. How about that? 23 pound. Beautiful fish. I'm just going to talk you through the rig that I use for a lot of my spring fishing. Certainly for this kind of single hook bait fishing that I do in the spring anyway. Spring, as we all know, is an amazing time to fish for carp. The water temperatures, the light levels, everything's starting to tip in our favour. The fish are becoming much more active, usually by the day. You know, everything is looking good. They're actively getting up and around, looking for food after the winter, and also looking for warmth as well. And I think one of the main things that kind of dictates how I fish in the spring is the conditions and where you're likely to find the carp. I think that's the main thing. I tend not to do a lot of fishing in the spring where I'm spot fishing, you know, with a marker, spom, bucket of bait. I try and let the fish show me where they want to be, and I'll fish for them in those areas accordingly. You might find them down one end of the lake on one day, following day you might find them right down the other end. They'll often be tucked up off the wind, you know, looking for the sun and a bit of warmth, and often up in the water as well, very often in sort of real kind of shallow areas. So I tend to fish really mobile in the spring, and I tend to do a lot of fishing just with single hook baits. So the rig that I'm going to show you now is the rig that I use for that fishing. Now, it's a pop-up rig predominantly, because more often than not in the spring, certainly when I'm casting at shows and things like that, I won't necessarily be fishing spots where I know what the lake bed is like. I might just be seeing a show and putting a rig out and just feeding for a drop. So you need a rig that is going to let you present over sort of almost any lake bed really. I'm using a helicopter here, and the main reason for that is because it allows the hook link some travel. So I can set the top stop 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches up, sort of depending on what I know about the lake. Really weedy lakes, there might still be some weed out there after the winter, might only be 6 or 8 inches on the bottom, flattened and dead, or it might be a little bit higher. But if you leave yourself, you know, a foot or so, on most lakes, you know really that if you get a half decent drop, your rig's falling all the way through the water column, you know that your rig is going to be nicely presented over the top. I tend to like a small pop-up actually in the spring, either a 12 miller often or a 14. This rig is really, really good for fishing the smaller hook baits. I do like the bigger, slightly more industrial hinge rigs with the big bristle, stiff section and the Ds, but they don't work so well for the 12 mil pop-ups. Whereas this one, is absolutely great for fishing the smaller hook baits because it's just a little bit more delicate, and you can balance it really nicely with the smaller baits. So in terms of the rig itself and how to put it together, it's dead simple. This is just my standard lead core setup that I use for 95% of my fishing probably. 45 pound thinking lead core, safety top bead, which slides off really nice and easy. And then I've got the double ring swivel on there. And then at this end, I've got the lead core spliced to a heavy ring. And then I've got the C-clip system on here. Now, if you're not familiar with the C-clip system, basically it's a system that allows your lead to break off really easy. Similar to kind of, you know, how a lead clip will allow the lead to discharge, but on a helicopter system. The clips come in 3 and 6 pound breaking strains effectively. And this is a buffer bead that just fits over the top. 3 pound is fine up to probably 40 or 50 yards with sort of leads maybe up to about 3 ounces. Anything over that, any sort of heavier leads, or if you're casting any further, then you can up to the 6 pounds. Very often you'll find that during the course of a battle, when a carp hooks itself, shakes its head, the lead will actually discharge, or if it gets stuck in some weed, then it's going to discharge as well. So for the rig, I start off with a size 4 curve shank. Now, you might think, size 4 for a 12mm pop-up, that's a really big hook, and it is a big hook, but because of the nature of how you tie this rig, because there's no extra rings, swivels, big extra heavy bits of metal here, it's actually quite a light rig, so you can get away with a size 4 and a 12mm pop-up as long as it's a nicely buoyant one, and it will still balance really, really well. The size 4 has the added advantage that it's got a really nice big wide gape on it as well, so the additional hooking potential that you get out of that as a pop-up is brilliant. The straight point as well for a pop-up rig helps hook fish just that little bit quicker. So to tie the rig, I just start off with a short section of braid, maybe 6 inches or something like that. You don't need too much. I just tie that really simply, just with a standard grinner to the eye of the hook. Trim the tag so it's nice and neat, and then you'll be left with 4 or 5 inches, and then I tie that with an Albright to the boom section. For the boom, I use 30 pound Think Link. I always make sure that I take as much of the kinks and the curls out of it actually before I tie it. It just helps when you come to steam it. So whilst it's still on the spool, under tension, put it down a dozen times maybe, something like that. Just get it as straight as you can. It just kind of helps with the tying process as well. So it's an Albright knot under the potty. You fold a section of the boom back, pass your hook and hook link, soft braided section hook link through it, 7 up, 5 back, back through, and then if you slide the knots back towards the hook first before you tighten it, that helps keep this section short. A lot of lads seem to struggle to keep this section to just a few mil, and it's because if you tie that knot and you just pull from either end, it basically just stretches the knot out and you end up with kind of an inch, inch and a half or even longer. But if you actually slide the knot down that way first, then it keeps it really nice and short. Once I've tied the Albright knot, just slide on probably 8mm of shrink tubing. Literally just want enough to cover the eye, and a couple of mil past the knot. Just helps keep it all nice and neat. This end, it's just a 3-turn blood knot. Because this is such a heavy, thick, stiff mono, you can get away with a 3-turn blood knot at that end. And then just a couple of little bits of putty to finish it. Obviously that's the perfect point for it. Keeps it really nice and neat. The putty grips it perfectly because it's over the knot. And I always just put a tiny little mouse dropping sized bit in the middle. Just helps it lay flat. It's attached to the hook bait, or rather how the hook bait is attached to the hook. Got a hook ring swivel sliding on the shank, a tiny little hook stop, and I just use a little bit of floss, thread it on as normal, tie a single overhand knot. I always tie a stop in there. I know a lot of lads just cut it and blob it. I've never really liked the big kind of black blob that you get on the top. And also I want to know if there's birds diving and stuff out there in the morning, and the hook bait's a little bit soft after a night in the lake, I want to know you've got the extra security from the stop in there. So I'll tie an overhand knot, put the stop in, tie another overhand knot over the top of it, and then blob it. 100% secure. It's never coming off no matter how hard you cast it. And then it's just a case of tweaking your putty just to get it balanced so it sits nice. And that will sit over the top nicely of pretty much anything you cast it over. As long as you get a good drop, you know that's going to be presented. Nice, small, bright visual bait. The fish are going to see it, they're going to find it, and if you put it in the right place, you've got every chance of catching a lovely spring carp.